Hi, my name's Chris and I live in Australia, and last weekend I went out to the March for Australia and I had a really great day. It was a really good vibe out there. It was thousands of Australians all marching in unity. We were all holding the Australian flag, and we went for myself, I was in Brisbane, went from Roma Street Parklands, and we marched on the Parliament House building in Brisbane, and it was just heartwarming to see thousands and thousands and thousands of my fellow Australians all marching together for the one cause to end mass immigration to the country. And then I got home from the march and I was in high spirits. I was like, yeah, that was a fantastic day. I turned on the news and started to watch what the news was saying, and lo and behold, the news had absolutely demonized the event. If you attended, how did you feel when the politicians completely denounced the event on the lead up to it and then after the event occurred? How did that make you feel? How did you feel when you turned on the news and for an entire week after the event, they were calling you a Nazi racist for attending, for showing up with your fellow countrymen and holding your country's flag? Did you watch the news and listen to the politicians like I did and think, well, that wasn't my experience there? In this video, we're going to talk about the absolute demonization and poor portrayal from the mainstream media on the event. We're going to talk about the piss poor attacks from the politicians about the event. And we're going to talk about the 0.01%, the Nazis and the antagonizers at the event, and we're going to talk about another rally coming up on September 13th. But first, quick recap. What was the March for Australia for? It was for an end to mass immigration, which is government policy. It was a protest against government policy. It was not against all immigration. It was not against immigrants, even though the politicians and the media just painted it as anti-immigration, anti-immigrant the entire time on the lead up and the entire week following the event. It was not about that. It was about an end to mass immigration, and it still is about an end to mass immigration. To understand the situation from 2023 to 2024, Australia saw 1.4 million people immigrate into the country. When you factor net migration, so some people leaving, there was 982,000 people across 2 years coming into the country. So far in 2025, for net immigration, we're on track for over another 400,000 people coming into the country. So ending mass immigration, the Australian government has no cap and no limit on new temporary visas being issued. It will just keep issuing visa after visa after visa. There's no cap, no limit, and we're seeing a lot of people coming through on temporary visas. There is a cap of about 185,000 on permanent residency visas currently, but the vast majority of people coming in are on temporary visas. Once again, guys, it's not to stop all temporary visas, stop all permanent residency visas. It's not to stop it. It's just to reduce it for a little while. Simply to end mass immigration to the country, we just want a cap on new visas being issued. Just a severe reduction. Just to put in perspective the problem, Australia is a very small country, 28 million people. So if we compared, say, Australia's population cap across to, say, the UK, America, and Japan's, and had the equivalent percentage of immigration coming through, that's the same as the UK getting 1.1 million people immigrating in per year, Japan having 2 million people immigrate in per year, or America having 5.1 million people immigrate in per year. Those numbers are multiple times more than those countries are currently letting in. So Australia right now, for its population size, is getting absolutely flooded. So on the March for Australia rally, 99.99% of people showed up for the right reasons to end mass immigration. Very, very small fraction of percent caused problems there. And because of these people that caused problems, it got smeared all across the media as a racist Nazi rally. They cherry-picked the violence on the media and portrayed the entire event as some Nazis fighting people in the streets. At the marches across the country, there were people who were elderly, there were people in wheelchairs, there were families there were children there. There were people who were not Caucasian, people of different ethnicities marching for a united Australia. Yet, our politicians, Labor and Liberal, smeared this entire march as a racist event, as an anti-immigrant event. The people who showed up were Australians, and they were proud to be Australian. They were proud to be part of this country. They were proud to hold this country's flag high and walk together through our streets. No Labor or Liberal politicians, our mainstream parties, not a single one addressed mass immigration. All they did was they started sputtering party lines like a broken whippersnipper, just going, it is anti-immigrant, it is, we're multicultural. country, this is a racist event, do not go. They all just started sputtering this shit out, man. And I was like, where are they getting this from? But thing is, guys, is this march against mass immigration, ending it, it's ending the policies that they've put in place and they want to keep in place. So that's why they're denouncing it. The mainstream media, both your news on the telly and all your print media as well, they were all printing before the event and after the event that it is anti-immigrant, it is anti-immigration, it is deportation, it is racist. But it wasn't. It was to end mass immigration. That was the core sole message, and none of them addressed it. None of them wanted to talk about it, and they went down and painted their own narrative saying it is all this other stuff that it wasn't. And I've been watching it day after day after day, just this endless propaganda assault from the mainstream media and the politicians just saying it was anti-immigration, it is racist. And they're flogging a dead horse. They're just doing, the horse is already dead, and they're flogging an already dead horse even further and further and further. It's how much further are they going to go with this? Because they're not talking about the cause of the rally. They're not talking about why the rally happened. They've painted their own narrative, and everyone who went to that rally, they got home, they flicked on the news, they flicked on the telly, and they went, that's not what happened. That was not my experience. Because for me, definitely wasn't my experience. I showed my experience out there at the rally, and it was not what the news was showing. It is wrong what these politicians, and it is wrong what the mainstream media is doing, showing this as a racist anti-immigrant rally. They're not showing the 99.99%, the elderly walking through our streets holding a flag high, the children walking through our streets holding an Australian flag and waving it happily. They're not showing that. They're not showing Australians united, singing together, singing our anthem together. They're not showing that. All they're showing is some cherry-picked fucking violent pieces from some piece of shit Nazis and some far left extremists just fighting on the streets. So let's be balanced and fair. Let's talk about the negatives and start to unpack them a little bit. For Sydney and Melbourne, it was a complete fuck up for the organisers to give a microphone to the Nazis and let the Nazis have their speeches at the events. That was a complete fuck up that never should have happened. I watched through Tom Sewell's speech in Melbourne. He's the head of the National Socialist Network, or the Nazis. And every time this dude starts doing a speech or a talk or something like that, he comes across relatively balanced, and then he'll say one word and it's like, oh fuck, here we go. And it just goes into a racist hate speech. In the Melbourne one, he was running through it okay, and then he said, thoroughbred. And I was like, fuck. And then it just went into a racist hate speech from there. But what should have happened, as soon as he said that word, and as soon as he started going to that racist hate speech, what should have happened is the event organisers should have just cut his mic. They should have just turned him off on stage. It should have been done there. But no, they screwed it up and they let him talk all the way through. The 99.99% of the crowd after that speech pushed the Nazis out of Melbourne. They pushed them away, pushed them out of the crowd. They got rid of the Nazis. They weren't there for a Nazi hate speech. Did the media show that? No, not really, because they wanted to paint it as a Nazi rally. There were multiple other speakers at the events in Sydney and Melbourne, multiple other ones that were not Nazis, that were talking to the points of the rally, that were talking to Australian culture, that were talking to Australian pride, that were rallying to end mass immigration. They were not Nazis. The vast majority of the speakers in Sydney and Melbourne, bar two, one in each city, were not Nazis. And when you zoom out a little bit, in Brisbane, no Nazi speakers. In Adelaide, no Nazi speakers. In Perth, no Nazi speakers. All the cities around Australia and all the regional towns around Australia, no Nazi speakers. But the news hones in on these two dickheads down in Sydney and Melbourne who should have had their mics cut by the organisers. How they even got on stage in the first place, I don't know. Shouldn't have happened. So that is a complete blunder from the organisers of them two cities. They should not have given them a mic and let them on stage, because it did not represent the 99.99%, and the other cities didn't get any coverage saying, well, there was no Nazis in these other cities with microphones talking on stage. Nope, they just focused on these two cities for these two speakers who were one of many speakers in each city. Following the event, the mainstream media and news was sharing around people who were coming from March for Australia and going out to a Chinese restaurant, getting a kebab on the way home, and saying, oh, look, these people marched for Australia, and there they are at immigrant businesses getting immigrant food. Ha, 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 ha. It's like, well, guys, like, it's not an anti-immigrant rally. It's not an It's not an anti-immigration rally, okay? It's not a racist event. Yet they pick two dots, draw two things together, and they go, oh, let's paint a picture around this. These stupid racist Australians going and getting Chinese food after marching against immigrants. It's like, they did march against immigrants. It was mass immigration. So they were just painting this bullshit story across everything, trying to mock and belittle everyone who attended. You know what? You might as well just turn around and said, oh, look at all these stupid Australians going getting American food, getting a Big Mac from McDonald's on the way home. The mainstream media went and cherry-picked violence and used it in footage to paint all the protests across the country as a violent rally. They were filming Nazis fighting far-left people on the street and saying this is what the event was like, failing to show the 99.99% marching peacefully, holding flags high and proud to be Australian. But they had to focus on these small amounts of violence. But what the media didn't cover, because they don't want to. They want to paint one narrative that it was a racist event. What they didn't cover was across all the cities, the far left groups, the pro-Palestine groups and the stand up against racism groups, the event organisers for their rallies, and the pro-Palestinian one, guys, they're up to like 98, maybe 99 weeks straight of rallies right now. Okay, so they're doing one every week. So the organisers organised for that weekend on the Sunday to meet up with another rally group and then to march across to the meeting points for the March for Australia to cause conflicts and problems. The event organisers from the far left deliberately organised marches across to create conflict with the people from March for Australia. They showed up yelling at the elderly holding flags, yelling at children holding flags, yelling at families, calling them racist Nazis, just screaming across the road, racist Nazis. They were antagonising. They were saying, give me one of them flags so I can burn them. Antagonising, trying to get violence out of it. And here's where I kind of draw the line a little bit. Okay, pro-Palestine, I get it. I get what you are protesting for. All right, there's a problem in the Middle East, you want it sorted out. What's that got to do with mass immigration in Australia, which was the cause for this rally? It has nothing to do. There's no crossovers. Yet you show up to counter-protest, you show up to antagonise, you show up to cause violence at these events. You shouldn't be there. It's as simple as that. And the fact that the police allowed the organisers to plot a route that meets up at these things for them to cause conflict when it's not even a crossover cause, why is that happening? It's not the police's fault, of course, guys. The issue is the organisers of these far-left groups. They should not have been allowed and should not have organised in the first place to be able to create a rally event that marches onto another rally event to cause problems. So for the media to turn around and paint March for Australia as a racist, violent rally, well, you know, got to look at the far left because they're the ones that showed up in the first place for it. One of the largest media pieces that happened across the week was reporting on Camp Sovereignty and Aboriginal land in Melbourne for a campsite. Got raided by about 50 Nazis showing up, destroying the site and beating people up that were on the site. And guys, I don't condone violence. This never should have happened. It was a disgusting act that occurred. But I just want to unpack it a little bit and what the media was doing with it. So the media linked this directly to March for Australia. They were linking across 50 Nazis storming through an Aboriginal site, beating everyone up, to the March for Australia. This was nothing to do with March for Australia at all. Okay, it was not the event location, it was not where the march went, it was nothing to do with it. This was a separate thing that occurred that had nothing to do with March for Australia. An outcome from this violent, deplorable attack, though, is Tom Sewell from the NSN, head of their party, has been arrested for it and has been denied bail. So he's in jail right now for storming Camp Sovereignty. Now, this is not to defend Nazis in any way, shape or form. It's simply to try and understand the story that happened. So you had 50 Nazis showing up to an Aboriginal site, leveled it, beat everyone up. My question is, and this is how I start to dig back through stories, is why were they there? Why did they show up ready to fight? According to The Noticer, which is a non-politically affiliated and non-biased independent publisher, there was a bit of a story behind them showing up. So on Camp Sovereignty, there was people from the far left groups meeting up there, organising there, and as people were leaving the March for Australia to go home, they were running down the hill and attacking them, chasing them away or getting into fights with them. It was reported that groups of 30 far-left activists were running down the hills and beating up groups of 1 to 3 people. Now, one of these groups that got beat up returned back to Melbourne City. Word got out, which is why the NSN Nazis showed up, because they heard that people were getting beaten up, leaving the march on their way home. They were beating people up, retreating back to Camp Sovereignty, and then going back down, doing it again. And that's where the conflict came from. That's when the NSN showed up, and that's where the mainstream media started their story. And that kind of stuff can't happen. An eye for an eye, and the whole world goes blind. It's wrong that people attending a peaceful protest were getting assaulted on their way home. It's also wrong as well. There would have been innocent people on that Aboriginal site who were assaulted by the Nazis coming through to fight everyone. So there's people on both sides that were completely innocent on this, that were targeted and victimised, and that's wrong. Never should have happened. Violence is not the answer to these kind of things. The major political parties, the mainstream media, and the far left have deliberately ignored the messaging for the March for Australia protest on ending mass immigration. They repainted it with their own narratives of racism and hatred, and then pushed that out, which has really radicalised a lot of people on the far left up against it. So they're hating on the March for Australia for reasons that the march wasn't for, which is a problem. And I think the mainstream media and the politicians have a lot to answer for there. Like, even to the point where politicians and community group leaders were putting out messaging saying, if you're of ethnicity, consider not going to work on Sunday because you may be targeting. And I think that's wrong. That's spreading a lot of fear, a lot of hatred. Everyone was welcome to March for Australia. The 99.99% were not anti-immigrants. They were not anti-immigration. They were not for deportation. They marched united to end mass immigration. And now everyone who attended has seen the way that our politicians from the major parties and the mainstream media has portrayed us as racist, anti-immigrant, hating Nazis. As not the fact it did not reflect our views and beliefs on the day or after the day either. And it makes us angry now. It makes me angry. Seeing the way the news and the politicians have talked about my beliefs. But it's not my beliefs they're talking about. I was end mass immigration. They're painting something completely different and saying that's what I am. And I'm not for that. I'm not for some state bureaucrats to put words in my mouth. I'm not for some mainstream media to tell lies about who I am and why I attended. Every single person has been slandered, and I think it's absolutely disgraceful that the mainstream media and the politicians has painted every single proud Australian the way that they did over the last week. Now onto the next rally. Australia unites against government corruption on the 13th of September across major capital cities in Australia. March for Australia was a nationalism rally. This is more of a freedom rally. The rally is to contest the government on its social media ban bill, against digital IDs, against the World Health Organization pandemic treaties, protecting our farmers, the housing and cost of living crisis, reforming immigration, and there is zero tolerance for racism there. If these are things that you feel passionate about and want to protest for, jump on Google or jump on Facebook and search Australia Unites Against Government Corruption. You should be able to find events pretty straightforward and easy from there. The organisers for this event are all public well in advance, and you can go look through what they do and what they're all about. Other than that, March for Australia, there is another rally in formation, in progress, and once there's more details and a date for that, I'll let you guys know. Once again, for all these rallies and events, I am not a promoter, I'm not an organiser for them, I'm just a dude online talking about them, and a dude who actually gets out there and attends himself. For those who attended March for Australia, what were your thoughts when you got home and you saw the press coverage, especially over the next couple of days? Do you think it was accurately portrayed, or were you like, this wasn't my reality for it? What were your thoughts when you saw it all? And for those who didn't attend March for Australia, what were your thoughts on the press coverage? What did you see them putting out there? Did you think it was realistic or not realistic? How did you feel when you saw it? Leave your thoughts down below in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.